Hello again, everyone. We're talking about some leadership here. We're having some open conversations, and this week we get to talk about opening up. Welcome back to my crew. We're Jenny Langwood, John Chappelear, and the famous Linda Vetrus Nichols. And of course, I'm still Terry Nichols, Terry Earthwind Nichols, the ambassador. And welcome to all of you out there today. I hope that this series is working well for you, and you're getting some information that is beneficial to you. I know I have, and I'm hosting this thing. I know in advance what's going on, and I still love it. It's just amazing. The connection that I have with these three people is wonderful. So I'm going to pass it off to Linda here, who's going to start up the opening up process, and we'll move this conversation forward.
Thank you. Well, when we keep hearing that 70% of executives in America today suffer from imposter syndrome. So that's definitely something to open up about and open up to. And if you're busy thinking about what other people are thinking about you, then that's definitely a check for dealing with imposter syndrome. And one way to move out of imposter syndrome is to realize that you are suffering from it. So be willing and open to just take a good look at yourself, listen to others. There's been a lot of talk about imposter syndrome, especially out on LinkedIn. So check out some of those articles as well. Jenny, I know you deal with some of your clients, I believe, deal with imposter syndrome. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Is that an issue?
Yes.
Would you like to speak to that then?
It has been for me as well. So I very much relate to the journey of relating to it. What's coming up for me is that when we say open up, I imagine doors opening up to reveal myself, to reveal who I am to another person. And what comes to mind is that if I am not yet accepting myself and loving myself for who I am, that's going to be a very scary process. Because it means that I'm completely revealed. Like there's nothing in between you and me. So with my clients and in my own mind, I like to share the story of imagine that there's a neighbor moving into your neighborhood, and you want to get to know this person. Because for us to accept who we are, we first get to know who we are so that we know what we are accepting. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So picture there's a new neighbor moving in, and you're walking over to this new neighbor to get to know them, to spend some time with them. And imagine that they are opening up their door towards you with eyes of resentment and hatred and maybe bitterness or guilt or shame or just hating on you. Are you going to want to stay in that person's company to get to know them? And the image here is that this is often the way in which we open the door or open up to ourselves with accusations or questioning. And that's really part of imposter syndrome, that we are looking at ourselves with very unforgiving and hateful eyes. And in order to open up, to share ourselves authentically with our team and with the world, we firstly get to open up that door with eyes of love and compassion and understanding really everything that is building trust between you and other people. Maybe that's a curiosity, caring for them, spending time with them, being generous with them and their story. Those are the eyes that we get to keep when we open up the door to ourselves, so that we get to know ourselves, so that we are comfortable in our own company, accepting ourselves first. And from there, it's just a joy opening that door up to the world and to everyone around you. So long story, but I hope that's making sense. And if not, please reach out and we'll have a conversation.
Delightful. I'd like to pass that right over to John. John, go ahead.
There I am. Hi. That was a lovely story, Jenny. Thank you for sharing that. The first thing that comes up for me with the idea of opening up is that, you know, I can't really give you anything I don't have. So if I don't have a sense of caring or love or whatever I'm looking for in a way of a positive behavioral style, I can't give it if I don't have it. I can pretend to give it, but usually that wears out pretty thin pretty quickly. That's where I hear things like, well, I don't understand why they got all upset. You know, I just said a few things, and it's, you know, then we don't notice ourselves and our own behaviors. And that's that sort of imposter syndrome. I go with an intent to, usually an imposter syndrome is I go to with an intent to impress, you know, versus I go with an intent to connect. And there's a real difference between the two, you know, sort of going with humility versus going with hubris. And it always reminds me of the line that I keep trying to remember. We were talking about memory earlier. I keep trying to remember the line. I want to work it into a keynote one time about the entire process of putting your mask on first and then passing it to the other people to make sure you have your mask on first before you can help someone else. And that's the same thing as far as I'm concerned. As far as what I need to do is make sure my mask is on, it's in place, and I'm breathing and living in a sense of positive energy before I can even possibly walk next door and knock on the door and talk to a neighbor. I have to be willing to accept whatever may show up when the door opens. Now, the other thing that's important, at least for me, when I'm working with people, for them to understand, sometimes their eyes open like, really? And I say, you have to understand that acceptance and agreement are not the same thing. Okay, I can accept you and completely disagree with what you are, but I can either make a big deal out of this and we can fight about it, or I can simply accept you for how you are. And maybe at that point, we can begin to work towards some sort of better mutual understanding of each other. But if I put down a fence between us, then nothing really happens. And that comes when I don't accept you and I don't agree with you. So for me, it's all about sort of, are you working on a process of self-talk? Self-talk's always worked well for me. I bought Shed Helmster's book probably in 1987 or something, and used to give it to all my salespeople, because it was one of those things that if you read it, it would keep you from wanting to slam your car door and drive back to the office. You know, it was sort of like, I am really good at this. I really have the skills it takes to be good at this. And it would get them to sort of restabilize themselves and move on to feeling comfortable in making another sales call. And this idea that, you know, if we build up a sense of self confidence and self-worth, then we are able to share that with other people. I did this self-talk exercise in a workshop once, and I had someone who didn't look very happy about doing this raise his hand and say, well, this is just lying. And I said, well, that's certainly one way to look at it, but I would like to look at it as, this is who I would love to become. Maybe I may not be there now, but I am working to become that. I am calm. I am a good husband. I am a loving parent. Whatever it might be, it's always in the present tense, and it's always focused at me. So, you know, just relax. Again, accepting his position. Just relax, and let's just keep moving forward. And by the end of the workshop, he realized, oh, I can see where we moved along. But if I had done my normal routine, which was, you know, push back just as hard as I was getting pushed, then usually he probably would have disconnected completely and gained nothing from the time. So a lot of what Jenny was saying is key. And for me, it's just simply remembering that I have to be healthy here before I can do anything out here. And that I'm always trying to grow into the person that self-talk tells me I am.
I love that, John. Thank you. And I never had the self-talk book that I remember. I had the self-talk tapes, and then he even came out with ones for children, which were super cool. So I was able to let my kids and other kids I was helping listen to those tapes. So that was really cool. Jenny was mentioning about knowing self and loving self, and if you like don't love yourself, right? So I came into this world based on my human design, not knowing who I am, and so I took all kinds of personality assessments, Myers-Briggs, you know, all that stuff in like my search to figure that out, and then left a marriage of 33 years. And even though Terry's like the love of my life, I realized that I didn't love myself. So, you know, searching to find out who you are can lead to then learning to love yourself, or even recognizing that you don't. So yeah, that was an interesting journey for me.
Yeah, you know, my journey in life has been um, learn from everything. You know, whether it was a successful situation that I made a decision on, or it was not a successful situation. Either way, I learned something that I can take with me for in the future. And you know, I most of my adult life before I went into Linda and I went into evolutionary healer and repetitive behaviors. I was a very real introvert. I could stand up on stage and talk to 2,000 people terrified to death, get off that stage and avoid anybody who wanted to talk to me. Because when I stepped up there, I had this armor, I had this facade and protection that would protect me, or so I thought. And so that's it. That's a lot about, you know, what we're talking about today with opening up. It's, you know, it's okay to be you, you know. And like John said earlier, I think is a very valid point as well. And that is, you know, you cannot give what you do not have. And so, you know, a great example is people who've been through repetitive marriages and friendships and all those kinds of things. They don't love themselves, so they can't give consistent love to those around them, and the people around them grow dreary with it and leave the situation. Um, and I think that is a great thought. And Jenny, as a behavioral scientist, I think that's a good take on with what you're working with your clients, is it not?
Absolutely. Repeat the question for me?
You know, a lot of your clients maybe seem to be extroverts, but they're terrible introverts. They're very afraid of themselves and the world around them. Mm-hmm. And that's a real almost bipolar without using the definition of bipolar. You know, that's a real yin yang pull to who am I, you know, and why am I terrified at one moment and absolutely calm at the next moment with the same person in the same conversation? I don't get it. Maybe you can bring something forward on.
Absolutely. There's that idea that it is supposed to look a certain way, or that I am supposed to be a certain way. And this all connects to what you were just sharing, that it was never about the ideal of things. We have so many ideals of what life or leadership is supposed to look like, when really it's all about the journey. It's all about the process of evolving. It's about the people that we connect with on the way and the people that we become on the way. I myself am a work in progress. So many of my clients, they have codependency in their character, or there's introversion, or there's high sensitivity. And what we work with is that these are ways of labeling ourselves, and we get to recognize that we have everything inside of us. I used to think of myself as an introvert. And when I put that label on myself, I placed myself in a container thinking that, you know, I can only operate within these walls. And what we get to recognize in the fact that it's all a journey of discovery and growth, discovering all of us, is that we get to lift ourselves out of this container and explore also the extroverted parts of us. And the parts of us that establish really healthy boundaries, or the parts of us that speak up, the parts of us that are on a live show with you guys, right? So it's all about the journey, and it's about the joy of discovery and discovering ourselves. Part of self-acceptance is recognizing that I get to also accept where I am, and you know, where life has brought me so far, and open up to the lessons. So
Wonderful, wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, you may have missed how Jenny talks about life and making decisions. Get to is a very positive response. When you have to do something, it's a negative feeling. It brings down your energy and your confidence. Get to does the exact opposite. And I just wanted to bring that to the fore because Jenny uses it quite regularly. We all do, per se. But Jenny really brings it forth, and thank you for doing that. Linda, some thoughts?
I had one and it just like went pew. It had something to do with what Jenny was talking about, so I pass.
Well, I've got something. It reminded
Okay,
me.
John.
There's this happened with me specifically, and it was one of those things that was very uncomfortable because it was embarrassing. And that was this sort of, you know, this is 1980. People weren't really talking about imposter syndrome. It was just I was doing something that I never really thought I'd be doing, and I didn't know that I was good at it or anything else. It just happened to be there. And there weren't any trainers and there weren't any coaches in those days. And you just kind of waddled your way through it and hope you came out the other side successfully. And that was, and this is still true today with entrepreneurial people, is that they start here and then the business, if it's successful, continues to grow. Unfortunately, their training usually stops at the point at which the company starts. So, I mean, I started a company with the intention of my only planning was to stay home and have lunch with my girls in the elementary school down the street once or twice a week. That was the entire goal of opening my own company. Well, you know, 2 years later, when I had 300 employees and 6 locations and 30 trucks and all this other stuff, I never got to lunch ever. But I did remember sitting in a chair behind this big desk that I guess I needed to protect myself, sitting behind this big desk, thinking like I was a kid, swinging my feet back and forth, waiting for the guy to come walking in the door going, "What the hell are you doing behind that desk? You don't belong here." And, you know, it was just like, and the weird thing is I used to, in those days I ran a lot, and I had a good friend of mine who was the general counsel to the White House for the Department of Labor. So he had a fair amount of people reporting to him. And John and I ran together for, I don't know, 20 years, I guess. And he felt exactly the same way. And he had tremendously higher levels of education than I had. I mean, I never went to law school or any of the other additional studies that he had. I had a business, you know, a business of my own versus working in charge of hundreds of attorneys and hundreds of employees. So it was just, I found kindred spirits everywhere, especially on the entrepreneurial side, where people are all of a sudden thinking they're going to open up this nice little mom and pop shop that they're going to have. And if it works out well, all of a sudden it's not a mom and pop shop anymore. Or they're going to open up a gas station or a grocery store, and it turns out to be 25 grocery stores. And all of a sudden it's, I don't have the skills for this. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Now it's a little easier today because you can call a Terry Nichols or a Jenny or a Linda and say, I could really use some help with this. Can you help me figure out a way to work through this? But yeah, you have to first admit that you're willing to, you know, acknowledge that I'm sitting in this chair, swinging my legs back and forth, waiting for somebody to come in and, you know, identify me as an imposter. And that's a really difficult thing for somebody who has the entrepreneurial ego to start a business. I mean, that it takes a lot of wherewithal to be willing to put yourself out there. That's not the kind of thing that a person says, I think I'm not capable or qualified to do the job I'm doing. Those are just, you know, diametrically opposed positions. So that's one of the reasons it's really hard do that. And I love Jenny's idea, the concept of saying get to. And then I try really hard to get to the point where I say I want to, beyond get or how, but want to. I want to do this because it's good for me. Just like Dayton said to me back here many years ago. I found that a lot of things I don't like to do, the things that are most don't like to do, are the things that are mostly going to move me down the path towards a positive change.
And then I'm going to. There's that whole step scale with all those. I remember what it was with Jenny. I would love it if Jenny would share the story about you were at a new company and the leader, a woman who was a very big extrovert, said, if you're, what did she say about not raising your hand and don't even bother? And I just love that story.
Thank you. Absolutely. I can share. So it was my first job working with business development, and I was at university, and I was in a meeting with someone from a neighbor faculty, and I was new in my position, and I was very active. I was silent because I was new, but I was very active in listening and zooming in and out to detail, to full view, to understand where we were operating in the process, what's my role in this, how can I contribute. And I remember at the end of that meeting, this lady said out loud, anyone who will be sitting silent does not have to join next time. And that was, of course, directed towards me because I had been the most silent. And I just remember that it was a time in my life where that could have made me more stagnant and stuck in my introversion. And I'm very glad that I had leaders in my life who was teaching me, maybe not by words, but by the way that they were approaching me and how they were treating me, that it's, that I do have everything inside. And I get to accept myself fully and also accept where I end so that I can invite other people to complement me. And that's the beauty of being a juicy culture. That's the beauty of being a team where I get to bring more of the analytic side and also learn from all the extroverts to discover the extroverted sides, parts of me. So thank you for bringing that up, Linda.
Okay, this is a dynamic conversation. And ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are listening in or right now live or on the recording, this is share this. There's some very valid points right now out there in LinkedIn land and social media as a whole. There's a lot of people thinking about imposter syndrome and the fact that there's ways to get past imposter syndrome. With a little bit of investigation, you'll find some different stuff. Our company's one of them, Evolutionary Healer. And I think it's important to say also that opening up starts with you again. Okay, open up, start talking out loud. Yeah, you're talking to yourself, so to speak, but get your human ears, start listening to your voice, because subconsciously what happens is it gives you self-confidence because you like your voice and you like to hear what you say rather than all those people talking to you in the background. So that's a very important thing to be thinking about. And I'm sure that you that are listening right now along with us know some people that probably you should share this to or in your network so that more people get a chance to hear about what we're talking about here today. And with that, any final thoughts from any of the gang here?
Well, John's business is changing the focus, and his website's .com, and Jenny's is Nara Communications, and hers is .se, which is Sweden.
I will say one more thing, and now that I've started to say it, I'm not sure I can remember the name of the author, but there's a really good book that's called The Untethered Soul, and the other one is The Surrender Experiment. And they're both written by a guy who just lives about 20 miles away from here. And he's just a wonderful guy. And I know the titles are right, so look up the titles. But one of them is this voice that's constantly in your head telling you not good, or you can't do this, you can't. He said, who is that voice? And where did that voice come from? And how do I quiet down that voice? It is amazing. If you tell people, one of the exercises I do about halfway through a day is say, pay attention to the fact that you are narrating everything that you're doing. Oh, look, there's a tree. Oh, look, oh, there's a friend of mine. Oh, look, there's a red car. You don't need to say all that stuff to yourself. You already know that's a red car. You already know there's people. So how do you stop that constant narration rolling through your head? And the book is excellent at helping you pay attention to those things and helping you notice that you're distracting yourself from these things. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. That's it.
Good one, John. If
Thank
you
you.
could, after the live today, put those
Sure.
book subjects in the comments. I'm sure people would like to look them up, myself included.
Okay.
So I'll pass over to Linda. Linda, some comments?
Oh, I'm great. This was good, guys. Thank you.
Well, okay. That was a great comment. Jenny, any final thoughts?
Yes, I love, John, that you're bringing up the narrative of things, because we do incorporate other people's stories of ourselves in our own story of who we are. It's part of our self-image. It's the interpersonal communication going on constantly, that we are looking at other people and imagining what they think of us, so that we can create the story of who we are. And this is a process that is ongoing. So we get to recognize it for what it is and make a choice. You know, when we hear those words, when we hear that story, we get to recognize, is this my own? Or is it my ex-husband's, my brothers, my friends, you know, the teacher that treated me this way when I was in 3rd grade? All of these stories, we get to find clarity as to where they come from, and make a choice of what is my story, because we do get to write our own stories. And that's a great adventure. Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another great conversation. Please look forward to Wednesdays over the lunch hour is what we call it, because some of them are going to be before 12 noon on Eastern time and some of them a little bit after, depending on the situations of the world. And we're just free flowing into the live so that we can be in that place of center and presence for you while we have our discussions. So that's it for this week. I'm your host, Ambassador 𝙬𝙬𝙘𝙪𝙀. And don't forget, on all of these social media places that you see, LinkedIn, my first Facebook page, and YouTube, very easy to grab our information and Google it if you want to, or just look us up here and reach out and start a conversation, starting with right now in the comments. Let us have some feedback here. Thank you so much for being here with us. I know we had a good time, and I hope it was very informative to you as well. Goodbye for now.